Right now, you are literally walking on money. And I do not mean that as a metaphor or a philosophical concept. I mean absolute, tangible, deeply liquid wealth. While inflation quietly eats away at your retirement savings, while the stock market violently swings on the words of politicians, and while grocery prices hit record highs month after month, there is an invisible, biological stock market growing right in your backyard. We have traded unbreakable ancestral continuity for fragile modern convenience. When the panic starts, when the grid falters, and when the supply chains freeze, the vast majority of people will step right over the very weeds that could save them. They will blindly look for something they recognize in an empty supermarket aisle. But high-end chefs, seasoned foragers, and people who absolutely refuse to rely on a fragile economy know the quiet, undeniable truth. You are surrounded by biological gold. Market data shows these wild plants, these so-called useless weeds, sell for up to $800 a pound. Today we are digging deep into the biological assets hiding in your woods. The third asset on this list was treated like a closely guarded wartime secret during historical rationing, used as literal currency when paper money meant nothing. And the very last one we will cover has quietly generated massive, untraceable household wealth with absolutely zero human labor, acting as a biological retirement account that takes a decade to mature. If you want to stop renting your existence from a fragile system and start tapping into the Earth's most lucrative perennial wild vault, listen very closely. Consider the first piece of wild equity, the springtime scroll, known to most as fiddlehead ferns. Long before global supply chains existed, indigenous tribes and early colonial settlers relied heavily on the violent emergence of these tightly coiled green heads breaking through the late winter frost. They were the ultimate, vital sign that the starvation season was finally ending. Fiddleheads carry the deep, earthly flavor of asparagus mixed with fresh spinach, and biologically, they are absolutely relentless. They thrive in the dark, damp, flood-prone riverbanks, where domestic, fragile crops would quickly drown and rot. They require no fertilizer. They require no tilling. There is no human intervention whatsoever. Yet, their value in the modern culinary market is completely staggering. A high-end chef in New York, Paris, or London will happily pay $20 a pound for these wild delicacies, plating them as highly anticipated seasonal centerpieces. A dense riverside patch, quietly multiplying in the shade year after year, can easily yield 50 pounds of harvestable coils in a single weekend. Stop and think about that math for a second. That is a $1,000 payout of tax-free, biological wealth sitting completely unnoticed by the water. You harvest them, the deep underground rhizome survives completely intact, and the bank vault effortlessly refills itself every single spring without you lifting a finger. But harvesting spring cash is easy. The true test of independence comes when the seasons turn brutal. What happens when the snow flies, the ground freezes solid, and your family desperately needs fresh, living nutrients to survive the dark, unforgiving months? That brings us to the freezing stream survivor, wild watercress. During the harsh winters of early pioneer expansion across the frontier, scurvy and severe malnutrition were the true predators. People were surrounded by miles of frozen earth, believing nothing green could possibly survive the deep freeze. But the ancient Roman military commanders knew better. They strategically planted watercress along their marching routes across Europe, because this spicy, peppery green is a brilliant biological anomaly. It actually thrives in freezing, running water. While your modern suburban garden is completely dead, withered, and buried under 2 feet of snow, wild watercress is vividly green, actively growing, and pulling massive amounts of trace minerals directly from the icy current. The economic conversion of this plant is completely undeniable. If you go to a premium grocer right now, a tiny, wilted bag of organic watercress, packaged in plastic and shipped from thousands of miles away, will cost you $5. A family that replaces their winter salad greens with a steady, foraged supply from a local clean creek will easily save over $300 in a single season. It is a free perpetual motion machine of human health that ignores the winter entirely. But saving a few $100s on grocery money is just the baseline. Finding a woodland asset so deeply coveted that rural families would literally guard its location with shotguns, that is an entirely different level of survival economics. Enter the honeycombed ghost, morel mushrooms. During the absolute lowest, darkest points of the Great Depression, and later during the strict domestic rationing of the Second World War, rural families did not just eat these mushrooms. They used them as hard currency. Morels were treated like a tangible wartime asset. These strange, brain-like hollow fungi have an incredibly elusive biological nature. They absolutely refuse to be farmed or tamed by modern agriculture. They pop up in the dead ash of recent forest fires, around the decaying root systems of dying elm trees, and in old, forgotten apple orchards. They feed on decay, turning dead wood into pure, concentrated economic value. And that value is astronomical. Because they cannot be mass-produced in a sterile commercial factory, the culinary market is forced to pay the wild premium. Fresh morels routinely sell for $40 a pound to local farm-to-table restaurants. But if you have the patience to run a simple dehydrator, the math woodland mushrooms, however, requires perfect timing, an intimate knowledge of weather patterns, and a bit of luck. But what if you need something that does not rely on luck? What if you want a guaranteed, unkillable food source that will literally outlive you and your children? Look no further than the ditch wealth. Wild asparagus. When the devastating Dust Bowl ravaged the American plains in the 1930s, wiping out thousands of fragile domestic farms and turning the sky black with topsoil, the wild asparagus simply survived. Early pioneer wagons had dropped these seeds along the trail generations prior, and the plant adapted to the harsh new world with terrifying efficiency. It grows a massive, underground taproot that dives incredibly deep into the earth, making it practically immune to deep freezes, severe droughts, and total agricultural neglect. It thrives in the forgotten ditches, along ancient fence lines, and on the harsh field edges that modern tractors simply cannot reach. The return on investment for locating and maintaining a wild asparagus patch is truly generational. A single established crown will produce massive, thick spears for 20 to 25 years. A family that takes the time to map out a local wild patch and harvests it over a quarter century completely eliminates the need to buy chemically treated imported grocery store stocks. That is keeping over $600 a spring firmly in your pocket, all from a resilient ditchweed that absolutely refuses to die. Let us stop for a second. Look around you, look at your kitchen, look at your neighborhood. Look at the complex web of digital infrastructure you rely on every single second of the day. Everything you see is built on a razor-thin illusion of safety. The modern supermarket operates on a 3-day just-in-time delivery model. 3 days. That is the only buffer standing between society and total chaos. If a targeted cyber attack hits the regional power grid, or a global conflict suddenly halts the oceanic shipping lanes, or a localized natural disaster takes out the trucking routes, those pristine, fully stocked shelves will be stripped completely bare in a matter of hours. People will panic. They will freeze in disbelief. They will sit in their homes and wait for the government to hand them a ration box. But the forest does not care about the power grid. The deep, rich soil does not care about the fluctuating stock market. While the masses wait in desperate breadlines, the ancestral forager simply walks out the back door and into the woods, completely detached from the collective panic. This is the ultimate form of rebellion in the modern age. Knowing how to extract deep nourishment and medicine from the wild is not just a quaint weekend hobby. It is economic anti-fragility. It is the absolute, uncompromising refusal to be a victim of a fragile system. Let that sink in. Calorie anchors and early spring greens will certainly keep your family fed when the delivery trucks stop running. But what happens when the pharmacy gates are padlocked? What happens when the imported antibiotics run dry and the winter flu season hits your community hard? You need the apothecary's arsenal. Black elderberry. For centuries, dedicated monks carefully cultivated elderberry in their quiet monastic gardens, and rural homesteaders fiercely protected these sprawling, aggressive bushes along their property lines. When harsh, unforgiving winters brought sweeping illnesses long before modern synthetic medicine even existed, the elderberry was the absolute front line of biological defense. Modern clinical studies now suggest exactly what those ancient monks already knew. The dark, heavily pigmented violet compounds in these wild berries aggressively support the human immune system, specifically targeting viral replication. Biologically, the elderberry bush is a towering fortress. It grows aggressively in poor, rocky soil, tolerates heavy, brutal pruning, and naturally forms massive thickets that protect the woodland edge from erosion and harsh winds. The economic reality of this wild medicine is absolutely shocking once you do the math. One mature, healthy elderberry bush easily yields 15 pounds of raw berries in the late summer heat. When those dark berries are simmered down with raw local honey and a few warming spices, that harvest transforms into roughly 20 bottles of thick, potent, dark syrup. Go to a boutique health food store right now, and a tiny 4-ounce bottle of organic elderberry syrup will easily cost you $25. That means a single wild bush, growing freely on the edge of the woods, is standing there holding $500 of powerful winter immunity. By harvesting it, you are bypassing the multi-billion-dollar medical supply chain entirely. A reliable winter apothecary is completely non-negotiable for true, enduring independence. But when the long, dark winter finally breaks, and the thick, humid summer heat arrives, the forest floor erupts with a massive, golden payout that chefs around the world obsess over. This is summer gold. The wild chanterelle. During terrible historical famines across Europe, when the working peasant class was pushed to the absolute brink of starvation, they survived by retreating into the deep woods. While the lords and kings selfishly hoarded the wheat and grain behind castle walls, the peasants quietly harvested the wild mushrooms. Chanterelles are distinct. They smell faintly of sweet wild apricots and damp, rich earth. Biologically, they are incredible. They form a deeply complex, symbiotic relationship with the sprawling root systems of giant, ancient oaks and towering conifers. You cannot plant a chanterelle seed. You cannot farm them in a climate-controlled greenhouse. They only exist where the ancient, undisturbed forest allows them to exist. And the global culinary world is absolutely obsessed with that exclusivity. Local farm-to-table chefs will gladly hand over $30 a pound for absolutely fresh, pristine chanterelles to elevate their high-end summer menus. When a heavy, soaking July rain rolls through a humid, established forest, it triggers a massive biological fruiting event. A knowledgeable forager, walking their established routes, can easily pull 20 pounds of vibrant chanterelles from a single, healthy hillside. That is a quiet, undocumented $600 payday, generated in a single afternoon simply for taking a quiet walk in the woods after a rainstorm. Summer cash is a blessing. It pays for winter supplies, upgrades your gear, and builds immense morale. But true, unbreakable generational wealth requires deep, unwavering patience. It requires planting a biological investment that compounds quietly in the shadows, far away from the eyes of the modern financial system. Before we reach the ultimate biological retirement account, we must look at a hidden culinary diamond growing directly beneath your feet. There are fortunes hiding entirely out of sight, growing right now under the roots of trees you probably drive past every single day. Behold, the underground diamond, the wild pecan truffle. Mention the word truffles, and most people immediately imagine wealthy European aristocrats using highly trained pigs to dig up thousands of dollars worth of rare fungus in the idyllic French countryside. But America has its own incredible hidden treasure. During the Great Depression, desperate people walked right past these buried gems while frantically searching the landscape for their next meal. Biologically, these truffles grow entirely underground, attaching themselves in a tight, symbiotic embrace to the root systems of native pecan trees across the American South and Midwest. They survive intense, blistering heat and terrible, cracking droughts by hiding safely and securely beneath the soil surface. Because they are completely invisible to the naked eye, 99% of the population has absolutely no idea they exist. But farm-to-table chefs absolutely do. These localized, intensely earthy diamonds routinely fetch up to $400 a pound. A homesteader equipped with a simple garden rake and a sharp, trained dog can walk through a forgotten, overgrown, unmanaged pecan orchard and extract hundreds of dollars of high-end culinary currency directly from the dirt in a single morning. Truffles require a trained eye, or a very good dog. But there is another spring phenomenon that requires no dog, just an incredible tolerance for an aggressively pungent flavor. It is fiercely guarded by Appalachian locals and violently fought over by Michelin star chefs. This brings us to the Michelin leek. The wild ramp. For generations upon generations, isolated mountain families consumed these intensely flavored wild onions as a vital, life-saving spring tonic. After months of surviving purely on heavily salted meat, dried beans, and root cellar rations, the aggressive, garlic onion punch of the wild ramp was historically used to wake up the human body, cleanse the blood, and end the terrible winter stagnation. Biologically, ramps are incredibly slow-growing perennials. They form dense, beautiful, vibrant green carpets under the bare canopy of the early spring forest, racing to catch the sunlight before the massive oak trees leaf out. They take up to 7 long years to grow from a tiny, hard black seed into a harvestable, pungent bulb. Because of their agonizingly slow growth, and their absolute culinary supremacy. They are currently facing an intense over-foraging crisis. Michelin star restaurants in major metropolitan cities are so utterly obsessed with their complex, pungent flavor that they drive the market price to absurd, staggering heights. A desperate chef will gladly pay $25 to $30 a pound for pristine, freshly dug, whole wild ramps. However, a strategically managed, sustainable woodland patch, where you only harvest the broad green leaves or carefully thin the mature bulbs every few years, can effortlessly yield hundreds of pounds over a decade. It becomes a recurring wild dividend. It pays out every single spring, completely untouched by inflation, stock market crashes, or currency devaluation. We have covered the fast spring cash, the unkillable winter survival greens, the medicinal pharmacy, and the underground diamonds. But everything leads to this final, monumental asset, the crown jewel of the forest, the ultimate biological bank account. You must deeply understand the Appalachian IRA, wild American ginseng. In the 18th century, legendary pioneers literally made their fortunes not on gold rushes, not on timber, but on wild ginseng. The roots were painstakingly dug from the dark, humid, sprawling hollows of the Appalachian Mountains and shipped across the world to Asia, where they were deeply revered for their incredible vitality-boosting properties. Biologically, ginseng is the undisputed master of patience. It grows incredibly slowly in the deep, undisturbed, cooling shade of mature hardwood forests. For years, it quietly, methodically stores the Earth's raw energy in its twisted, gnarled, remarkably human-shaped roots. This is not a fast flip. This is not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is a long-term, unbreakable economic shield. Wild simulated ginseng roots take a minimum of 7 to 10 agonizingly slow years to reach a mature, harvestable size. The plant must endure a decade of freezing winters, summer droughts, and woodland predators. But the eventual payoff is staggering. International buyers and specialized herbalists routinely pay between $500 and $800 a pound for high-quality, aged, wild simulated roots. A family that slowly cultivates a hidden, completely invisible half-acre patch deep in their woods is essentially guarding $30,000 of untraceable biological equity. It is a tangible, living bank account that no government can freeze, no digital hacker can steal, and no economic recession can devalue. We are standing at a profound, terrifying crossroads in human history. The gap between those who know how to extract life, medicine, and wealth from the earth and those who depend entirely on a fragile, flickering digital grid is widening every single day. The digital numbers on a screen can vanish in a heartbeat. The grocery store shelves can empty in an afternoon. You have to make a choice right now about your identity and your future. Are you going to place your complete faith in a system that is constantly one major crisis away from total collapse? Or are you going to choose to root yourself in the unbreakable ancestral knowledge of the wild? Just knowing the names of these plants is not enough. You need a highly structured, repeatable system. I have developed a specific 4-step framework to build your own decentralized biological grid, taking you from immediate fast foraging wins all the way to planting legacy wealth that will feed your grandchildren. If you are finally ready to stop renting your existence and want to learn exactly how to plant once and harvest for decades, click the video on your screen right now. The shelves will eventually empty. Make sure your woods are full. I will see you there.